So, hello everyone, welcome to our conversation tonight, our Scottish Eco conversation. Can I welcome each and every person that's here? Thank you for coming. I'm really looking forward to all the discussions from our speakers and from the questions that are raised. Can I have a particular welcome and hello to all those who are joining us for the first time, and also just to say how delighted we are that this is truly an ecumenical event tonight, and I think that's something worth celebrating in our conversations as well. As is our custom, we'll begin with a moment of silent prayer. This is the cartoon that Father Augusto Zampini, who is the co-lead of the Vatican COVID-19 Commission, referred to in his presentation at our assembly in July. It's a powerful image that puts the challenge of the current global pandemic into a chilling perspective. As Father Augusto stated, we have to first of all acknowledge that we are in an emergency situation and that this is a complex crisis that needs prophetic imagination and conversion to new, just and sustainable ways of living together on Mother Earth. Let's just spend a moment in silence, inviting the Spirit to flame our imagination and conversation. As we pray a prayer to the Holy Spirit by Dermot O'Murchan, let us pray for the grace that individually and collectively we will be filled with the utter fullness of the Holy Spirit tonight.
Come, Holy Spirit, breathe down upon our troubled world. Shake the tired foundations of our crumbling institutions. Break the rules that keep you out of all our sacred spaces. And from the dust and rubble, gather up the seedlings of a new creation.
Come, Holy Spirit, enflame once more the dying embers of our weariness. Shake us of our complacency. Whisper our names once more, and scatter your gifts of grace with wild abandon. Break open the prisons of our inner being, and let your raging justice be our sign of liberty.
Come, Holy Spirit, and lead us to places we would rather not go. Expand the horizons of our limited imaginations. Awaken in our souls dangerous dreams for a new tomorrow, and rekindle in our hearts the fire of prophetic enthusiasm.
Come, Holy Spirit, whose justice outwits international conspiracy, whose light outshines spiritual bigotry, whose peace can overcome the destructive potential of warfare, whose promise invigorates our every effort to create a new heaven and a new earth, now and forever.
Empowered by the Spirit, we continue the mission entrusted to us. Come, Holy Spirit, come. So it's now my pleasure to welcome and introduce our four speakers tonight, who will each talk to us for between 5 and 7-8 minutes, and then after that we will have discussion. For those of you that know, that have been here before for the sessions, you know that we use the chat button, so if questions are coming to you as people are talking, please feel free to put questions up on the chat, and Callum will monitor and order that in terms of the discussion as we go along, if that's okay. All right? Can I introduce the four speakers first, and then I'll ask them individually to talk. We have first Stephen Curran, Manager of Eco Congregation Scotland, and also a Glasgow City Councillor, and has served as City Treasurer and Executive Member for Education and Young People. We have Jane Mellett, is the Laudati Si Officer at Trocare. In 2018, she participated in the climate pilgrimage, walking over 1,000 km from Italy to Poland for the UN climate talks, COP24. Tonight, she's representing the global Catholic climate movement. We also have Danny Sweeney, who is the Coordinator for Justice and Peace Scotland, and Jonathan McAveety, who is SCIAF's Campaign Officer. Each of the panel will give a brief input, then we'll have an open conversation. And as I've said already, please use the chat function to register your questions as we go through. So, can I start by asking Stephen to speak to us this evening? Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here this evening. The one thing that's worth adding is I'm also a parishioner at St Helens in the south side of Glasgow. And I think it's important that we think a wee bit about what could be happening in Glasgow next year in terms of the discussion that we're going to have. I'm just going to start sharing my screen just now. So hopefully you can all see this okay. Obviously, we know about the situation that faces the planet in terms of the terrible pollution that's facing us. And I know the work you've done and the speakers that you've listened to in recent months have drawn attention to the climate emergency that we're facing. So the BBC Blue Planet programme, where this picture's taken from, has really set the scene for the global issues that we face. This is a flood map for a random area of Scotland. It's actually St James Parish area in Kinross. The problems that we face in this country are also significant in relation to the rise in water levels around the world. And there's two things that drive us as Christians, and for us in Eco Congregation Scotland, that question, who is my neighbour? On the left, you'll see a subsistence farmer in Africa who, because of drought and terrible extremes of weather, is unable to feed his family. And on the right, you'll see a picture of a newborn baby. And it's that question that Pope Francis asks us in Laudato Si: what kind of planet do we want to live in, and what kind of planet do we want to leave for the generations to follow us? Where we come in, we're an independent ecumenical charity. We work all over Scotland, and we support churches of all denominations in encouraging and supporting their work in environmental activities. We care passionately for God's creation. We're a faith-based movement, and it's all about local groups of Christians working together, working cooperatively with each other and with others who care about the environment. And we're encouraging transformational change as individuals in our community and nationally to influence what happens around the world. There are three key prongs to our work, which those of you who have done the Laudato Si animator training will recognise as slightly different terminology. We're here to encourage and support churches to discover what it means to care for God's creation in prayer, worship and conversation. In other words, through spiritual living in terms of worship. And we know the Eucharistic prayer talks about the God of all creation. We also support and encourage churches in practical living, which is about care into action in our communities. For example, last year, St Margaret's in Lochgilphead held a climate conversation that was open to everybody in the town to talk about the changes we want to make. But it's also about things we can do as individuals, things we can do in our own church, potentially in the church building, in terms of saving energy. But it's not just about energy, it's about more important things than that as well, in terms of the wider community, biodiversity, respecting wildlife, and caring for the local environment in terms of cleanups. We also, the third prong, have global living, where we support and encourage churches to campaign on the urgent threats to the web of life in a vulnerable world. And we see that in terms of the work that we do, particularly with SCIAF, Justice and Peace Scotland, who are going to be speaking with us tonight as well, supporting each other across Scotland to push for governments here and around the world to act on the climate emergency. How can you get involved? It's all about registering as an eco congregation, a community of faith. And in that faith community, think, discuss, act and pray on environmental concerns. We can encourage people to work towards improving the work they do with their own award scheme. And it's all about supporting each other. So it's a great place to work with other churches, other Catholic parishes and churches from all the different denominations in Scotland. And the important thing is to sign up as a church, as a community of faith, where you affirm that environmental issues and caring for God's creation form part of what your life and mission is all about. It's free to register, and the website there, ecocongregationscotland.org/get-involved is the important one to go on. And small groups can get active in each parish to look at this. So we've got justice and peace groups. There are also parish councils that will look at this as a particular issue as well, working together on environmental issues. We've got a church checkup that helps you look at the work you can do in your own church, and a plan of action that makes sense where you are, what makes sense in your community, in your parish, and with the people who are active in your parish to do this. We've got 504 churches now registered across Scotland as eco-congregations. It's about 1 in 7 of the churches, about 14% of churches across Scotland. We've got 22 local networks where all the churches come together in smaller regional clusters to support each other and ideas to save energy, to campaign, to pray together, and to think about what they can do to make those steps to make a difference in their community to help address environmental issues. We're the largest network of local environment groups across the country as a result of this because of church volunteers. And we currently have 32 Catholic parishes. This week I was delighted St Ninians and Dundee's Ming's Hill area signed up to be our newest Catholic parish. But we'd like to see more getting involved across Scotland. Our award scheme's really good at encouraging growing efforts in your parish congregation, and that's something where we can share best practice and what's able to be done. The coming month's really important. I'll briefly finish on this. Creation time, the season of creation, we produce ecumenical materials every year for use. It's based on the revised common lectionary which the Church of Scotland use, which is very similar to the lectionary that we all use on a Sunday in terms of the Catholic Mass of a Sunday. And it's been produced by our chaplain on the left here, who's actually from the United Reformed Church, David Coleman, but this is a picture of him at Our Lady of Loreto and St Michael's in Musselburgh, because we're active in churches of all descriptions working in an ecumenical way. And the big secret is this is the easiest way to work with other churches of different backgrounds right at this moment in time. Final comment, next year Glasgow will host the COP26 United Nations talks. We're encouraging every church in Scotland to think about how they can get more active in the environment, how they can make a difference in their own community, how they can make that transformational change happen where you live, but also tackling the issues all around the world by pushing governments, not just their own government in the UK and the Scottish context, but governments all around the world to make that difference, because it's a critical time and it could be a Glasgow agreement that we could all be part of. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Can I just pass straight over now to you, Jane?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. So my name is Jane Mellett. I work for Trócaire in Ireland. Trócaire is the sister organisation of SCIAF and CAFOD. And I'm speaking tonight on behalf of GCCM, the Global Catholic Climate Movement. They asked me to share with you on their Laudato Si Animators program. So I just want to share my screen here 1 second. Hopefully you can all see that. So I suppose my own connection to GCCM, we're a member of Trócaire, is a member organisation of the Global Catholic Climate Movement. And as mentioned, I joined a GCCM pilgrimage in 2018, walking from Italy to Poland for the UN climate talks, carrying the message of Laudato Si. These are the types of things GCCM get involved with. They're quite a prophetic witnessing organisation. It's a joy to be with them. They were founded in 2015, and I suppose that's a landmark year for a number of reasons. It was in anticipation of two big events. One was the publication of Laudato Si, Pope Francis's encyclical on the environment, and the second event that year, of course, the signing of the Paris Climate Accord. So there's lots of different member organizations to GCCM, and they do fantastic work around the world. And just to bring you into their course that they're offering, the Laudato Si Animators course is quite an experience. It takes about 4 weeks to complete. It's an online course taking about 3 to 4 hours per week. During lockdown, thousands of people enrolled on the course. It was their biggest enrollments ever for all sorts of reasons. And I joined in with the participants to see, you know, how it was, what would it be like to journey in this way with a group of people from around the world. And it was just really fulfilling. So you log into the course for an hour a week on different webinars, and then you've a little bit of reading and coursework to do. But just the aims of the course, or what will it bring if you did decide to go into it, just says there, it will empower you to learn how Laudato Si is part of Catholic social teaching to protect human dignity and the common good. To understand the causes of climate change and how it affects the poor the most. I think this was the most powerful aspect of the course for me, because the webinars involved people on the front lines of climate change from places like the Philippines, Bangladesh and so on, who are really suffering the catastrophic effects of this environmental crisis, and then experts from around the world inputting on lots of different issues, from the climate science to theology and spirituality. And then there's a journey that the participants take. So you're looking at your connections to this crisis and to the movement that is solving it, and how you might become part of that locally as well as in the global scene. There's a couple of little assignments on the Laudato Si Animators course to practice leadership in your community. So you're encouraged to take on a small project towards the end locally. It can be an online event, it can be a gathering if we're allowed to gather anytime soon in groups, to reflect on aspects of the climate crisis, how you might act locally and globally. And this is also quite a prayerful, spiritual course where people are encouraged to link this in with their own personal faith journey, wherever they might be on that, and to share within the groups about it. So you're being asked to make a commitment, so to dedicate yourself to a lifelong journey of ecological conversion, protecting our sisters and brothers and the common home that we share. So really would encourage anyone who's thinking about delving into Laudato Si a little bit more, but also if you're just interested in finding out more about the climate crisis and how you might fit in on that ladder of activism, whether it's through prayer, reflection, action, and where you might do that, I'd strongly recommend you checking out the GCCM website. They just asked me to highlight one event also this evening. On the 1st of September, there will be an ecumenical prayer online, and you can register for this by going to theseasonofcreation.org and going to the events section on that page, and you can register. Really encouraging us all to come together, united as Christians around the world, to pray for creation and for this beautiful season that's approaching. So I'll stop there, and obviously we'll have more time for questions and so on, if people want to ask anything. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much. I'm going to go straight over to Danny now.
Well, thanks, Rosa. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Callum's actually going to share screen for me because I'm working off my phone right now. So limited technology, but there we go. I'm going to talk to you about a project which you may not have heard of yet because it's not officially been launched. It's still in the works, but coming soon, hopefully, to a school near you. Can we have next slide, please, Callum? Super. So Laudato Si Schools. It's an idea being done jointly between SCARES, the Catholic Education Service, SCIAF, and ourselves to make sure everyone gets full credit. It started conversations we had at the beginning of the year, looking ahead to when COP was going to be here, in November, and we wanted to capture some of the energy that young people have, the passion, the commitment we've seen, the witness from the climate strikers, and all that. And that couldn't be us suddenly telling them what to do. We have no credibility to do that. They are the ones who are leading. But at the same time, we wanted to make the most and have a lasting legacy of COP being in Scotland, and something that we could take, that could be embedded in the schools and in the culture. As it happens, we were not the only ones thinking along this line. Next slide, please. This document, which some of you, I'm sure, have already seen, if not, the link is there, we'll get that shared, but it was put out by the Dicastery, put out from the Vatican. essentially for this anniversary, the 5 years of Laudato Si, calling on the whole church. And if you read it, it's not a long document, but there's no get out for anyone. It's calling on the whole church, schools, parishes, dioceses, universities, religious congregations, everybody to start this journey over a 7-year period to really embed and start trying to live the message of Laudato Si in their lives, in their communities. So it was great for us that, sort of great minds think alike. So that's our response. Next slide, please, Callum. This is based on what the Vatican has put out. They have 7 goals for this project and seven goals, 7 spheres to put this thing into action. Again, response to the earth, response to the poor, the economy, the community, spirituality, education, and a simple lifestyle. Next slide, please. The schools, we're rooted in the idea of ecological education, and that's where it's starting. But as I think most people will get with this stuff, it cuts across. So even though we're based in education, those 7 goals are the basis of the whole program for the schools to look at. And at the same time, it's going to be, a lot of this is going to come from the RE departments in the school, but it does cut across all your subjects and everything. So hopefully when it's done properly. How are we approaching this? It's very much a work in progress. Even since I made this slide earlier today, we've now gone to 12 quotations. So this really is evolving. So that is a slight error there. But we've taken 12 quotations out from Laudato Si. And for each one, backed it up with questions to look at. Next slide, please. This is some of the things, I don't know if you'll be able to read that, but there's questions to look at, things to reflect on. Next slide, please. Bits of scripture to reflect on as part of it. Next slide, please. And also drawing on the body of sort of social teaching in the documents, Pope Francis, Pope Benedict. The oldest one that we have is from a document called Aquo Dei, which is about 300 years old. So we do hit the spectrum of this. For each one of the quotes, again, I apologize if you're on a smaller screen, I'm not sure how clear that is, but for each one of the quotes, there are the 7 goals and activities, suggestions, ways to get involved with different organizations to dig into all of this, to explore it. It does draw on SCIAF and Justice and Peace Scotland as partners, but the invitations are there for parishes, for schools to make those links, for schools to reach out to people working in the local area, to make links to wider partners. One of what we're doing right now, the benefits, one of the things we've really learned in this recent pandemic is how interconnected we can be. So we can be speaking to people in other parts of the world who are on the front line of this. And that's what this looks like. Next steps, over the season of creation, we're having 4 meetings. And then November, Catholic Education Week, schools are going to start and commit to this idea. I probably should have said this, for those who know sort of Catholic schools in Scotland, this is not like the Pope Francis Award or the Caritas Award, where you do work and you earn it at the end. We're hoping in November, the first schools will essentially say, we want to do this, we're going to start on that journey, and that's it, you are a Laudato Si school, and are going to follow that process as it goes through. So this is hopefully coming to a school near you, and again, it could be a good starting place if you are asking these questions in your parish, in your diocese. Speak to the schools, and again, if you're in a school, certainly do have a look at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Thanks very much. Jonathan, we'll now come to you for the contribution.
Yep, thank you very much, Rosa, and thanks for inviting me along to your eco conversation. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the people which SCIAF works with, people who are living on the front line of the climate crisis. SCIAF is the official overseas aid agency of the Catholic Church in Scotland, and we work in 15 countries across Africa, Asia and South America. But I'm only going to speak about Zambia tonight, and that's because one of our local partners from Zambia is going to be joining us in for an online event during the season of creation in a couple of weeks. So I'm just going to share my screen for you. Okay, should be able to see that. So in central Zambia, there's been increasingly severe droughts in recent years. There was a really bad one in 2017, again last year, and also this year, with the result being obviously that the harvests are very poor, very limited food, and the prices of food have skyrocketed. Right now, there's many people are surviving on as little as 3 meals per week. This year's harvest is expected to be below average, so we know that the situation is only going to get worse. Now, we're not saying that every single drought would not happen without climate change, but we do know that these disasters and their intensity and their frequency are becoming much greater, and that the millions of people in southern Africa who rely on the land for survival are being put at increasing risk. So SCIAF supports the local Catholic Development Agency in Zambia, Caritas Kabwe, to provide immediate relief to people, but also to try and develop long-term solutions so that people can try to adapt to the reality of climate change. In 2017, with their support, the local agency started a project of training farmers to diversify crops, because we know that if they have a more diversified range of crops, they're more likely to have more food if one crop should fail. And when Rab had told me about how the idea for this event came out of your recent assembly and the journey of discernment, I went back to listen to the talk which Lorna Gold gave on Laudato Si, and something that she said really stuck with me when she talked about how one of the most important things that Laudato Si has offered us is a new perspective, the chance to look at the world from a distance. Integral ecology, as Pope Francis put it, is the idea that everything is connected. And I think that the coronavirus pandemic has also given us a new perspective on the challenges facing the world today. People, I think, are now aware of the stark differences between rich and poor in the new way which they might not have been before. In Scotland, we are adjusting to a new normal. We wear face masks in public, we are following lockdown restrictions, and we wash our hands more often. But the virus has made it clear that for many people in the world, that's just not possible. Not everyone has access to soap and clean water. Not everyone is able to stay at home and to stay safe. If we look at countries like Zambia, where people were already dying due to climate change, now they have the added threat of COVID-19. Protective face masks and hand sanitizers aren't affordable, and poor diet and high rates of poverty related to diseases mean that people are at greater risk of catching the virus. So what are we doing about this? So we know that in order to achieve lasting change, we need to lobby our governments in the UK and Scotland. After all, Scotland has benefited historically from pumping out emissions. We became rich as a country off the back of the Industrial Revolution of the Empire. And yet it is the poorest nations like Zambia who have done the least to contribute to the problem of climate change who are now feeling the effects the most. So that's why I'm going to ask you tonight to support SCIAF's new campaign, which we're just launching this weekend, which calls on Boris Johnson and Nicola Sturgeon to build back better and to focus on building a just and green world. There's 3 main parts to that. The first part is we're looking for more support for countries who are facing the double threat of coronavirus and climate change. We know also that the governments are prepared right now to write massive checks to shore up our economies. We need to make sure that that money is not being invested in sectors which are going to lock in carbon emissions for years to come and make irreversible climate change inevitable. And the third part is recognising Scotland's historic role in creating the problem and increasing our contributions to Climate Justice Fund, so that we can play our parts as good global citizens, especially now when we're going to be welcoming the world to Glasgow for COP26 next year. Another thing which you can do is to join in one of our events during the season of creation. Danny spoke about the 4 events which are focused on teachers and educators, and you can find them on our website. We also have 4 events which are aimed at the general public. First one on Tuesday next week, the World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation, where Father Jim Lawler is going to be leading us in a short reflection on Laudato Si. We have Caring for a Common Home in our parish, which looks at many of the issues which Stephen was talking about how we can take action in our own local parishes. What is climate justice? The partner from Caritas Cabwe, who was speaking about earlier, she will be joining us on the 16th of September. So you can come and hear more about the challenges they face in Zambia right now. And finally, on the last day of the season of creation, which is the Feast of St. Francis, we have a session on celebrating our kinship with the earth and every living creature. So you can have a look at those events and sign up if you like on our website, which is at skiaf.org.uk/events. And I will just leave it there, and I think we're moving on to the questions, so I'll stop sharing my screen. There we go.
Thank you, Jonathan, thank you. And thanks to all our speakers, which I'm sure we all agree, it's just been so heartening and hopeful to hear how much is going on and the depth of the resources that are available in terms of reading, spirituality, but also that call to activism and to responsibility, both at an individual level and spreading across communities, societies, countries and the world. So thank you. And now I'm going to hand over to Callum, who's going to lead us in the questions that have been put up. I can see there have been a number already. So Callum, can I just hand over to you for that now?
Of course, and I wonder if I can just cross to the first question from Linda, who asks, do you see Equal Congregation or other similar bodies playing a part in the Scottish Government's proposed regional community action groups? So Stephen, if I can just cross to you for that one, please.
Yeah. Thanks, Callum. It's a really important question. There's something the Scottish Government's been consulting on over the past few months. It's the idea of community climate action hubs in a regional setting, and they're initially looking at places outside of the bigger cities. What they've done in previous years is give organisations, and some churches have been successful in getting quite a lot of funding for this in their own communities. It's called the Climate Challenge Fund, and it'll be to do initiatives like reuse, recycling plastic, reusing clothes, or it could be food projects like community fridges and so on, energy efficiency. It could be reaching out into the community to help people save their bill, as well as the cost of their bill, as well as saving the use of energy to some extent. So they're looking at it in a different way. Instead of funding organisations to do that on their own, to provide that work, they want groups to come together in a regional setting for that. And there's a great opportunity for any church in that to potentially be the host for that climate hub in their own church building, in their hall, in their own community, or to be somebody that is encouraging people to be active in that particular hub. So they haven't firmed up exactly what they're doing yet, but any church could be part of this in whatever way makes sense in terms of your own community, your own number of church volunteers, or the capacity of the building, maybe to be somewhere where they could base a lot of this. So we'll be encouraging people to look at that very positively.
Fantastic, thank you, Stephen. Danny, if I can cross to you for the next question. And it's in relation to the Laudato Si schools. Could you share with us if that's just for secondaries or if primaries can get involved as well?
Oh yeah, no, it is for all schools, so primary and secondary. Again, the resources there's different levels, so there'll be one sort of level for primary school students, another for senior students, but it is aimed at all schools. And again, obviously it's coming out of ourselves, SCIAF and SCES, but there's no reason why other schools who have an interest in this stuff may not want to pick it up. Barbara Cooper, who's the director of SCES, who some people I think will know, the last time we spoke, said she's not aware of any other education service in the English speaking Catholic world who are this far on in the process. We almost seem to have got a bit of a cheeky head start on what the Vatican has put out, because we were looking at this ahead of COP. So there's a real potential for it to go to any school that wants it. it will be different. Again, some of the stuff particularly which JMP we're involved in terms of the cry of the poor. Obviously, we approach issues slightly differently when we're working in high schools than primary schools, but at the core, it's a call for all schools to engage with this.
Thank you, Danny. Perhaps just as a follow-up to that question, also this next question comes from Catherine, who asks, she says, the work in schools sounds great, but how are we facilitating young people sending their concerns back to your various organisations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't actually work in a school myself, so I may not be the person to ask. As part of this, like I said, JMP Scotland and SCIAF are very much involved, but we are pulling in partners from across the country. Stephen has not been told this, but eco congregations are somebody who we are really encouraging the schools, teachers, head teachers, those in education committees to be looking at seriously. It's not a go away and do it on your own. We do want people to draw on all the expertise, the knowledge that is there, and to make that links. So I don't know if that specifically addresses the question as sort of how to send feedback. But it's not about working in a silo. You know, it is about drawing on the expertise that is there and being able to embed it in the school. And again, ideally, hopefully, and I think we are quite hopeful. You know, a lot of schools are at the centre of, you know, sort of the parish, the local community. If a high school has got primary schools connected with it in some way, there's a real chance to do this in partnership and to build on that. So I can't really answer the specifics, but certainly, you know, hopefully it will be two ways, and students will be able to sort of lead and you know, take the lead on this and be very clear on you know, what does work and what doesn't work.
Thank you, Danny. I wonder if I could invite you all to respond to the next question. If we start with yourself, Jane. Liz asks, for all speakers, what key message do you want to see agreed at COP26?
A nice, easy question. Thank you. I suppose I saw the question, I was reflecting on it. For me, I think increased ambition for all countries has to be the #1 priority. So countries agreed at the Paris Agreement to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. But currently, many countries around the world are missing these targets completely. So the science tells us that we're actually headed for 3, possibly 4 degrees of warming under the current situation. So you would like to see much greater ambition for countries, and maybe greater penalties for those that miss the mark. And Ireland is one of those countries that are going to be fined heavily in the next few years for missing their EU targets, and rightly so. So that's one piece of it. And just to say another aspect, I think, because we have missed this year's COP due to COVID, there's greater urgency. And the US presidential election, the results of that would have been a day or two after the COP26 would have started in November. And this has huge significance, because the result of that will have a direct impact on the COP, because at present, President Trump is planning to remove the US from the Paris Climate Accord, and a change in politics there would mean that they were back on board, and they are one of the largest emitters on the planet. So, you know, it's just interesting to watch that and be aware of how that can affect something like the Paris Climate Agreement. So COP26 is hugely important, and we really need to pray and campaign that in the next 12 months the pressure is kept on, and, you know, head for Glasgow with that in mind. Yeah.
Thank you, Jane. Jonathan, your priority for COP26?
Yeah, I think that one of the key issues will be this concept called loss and damage. And basically what that means is that in previous COPs, there have been negotiations that have went on non-stop about recognising that there are a number of countries, particularly like small island states in the Pacific, which are going to be wiped off the face of the earth with rising sea levels. And even if we manage to cut emissions, it's very unlikely that we'll be able to prevent much of the damage that will be caused. And so there's a moral responsibility on richer countries, which have caused most of the emissions, to compensate countries which are paying the price for it. At the last COP in Madrid, there was a kind of stronger commitment to look at it. From the next COP, we actually want to press for action on it to get some kind of agreement in place.
Thank you, Jonathan. Danny?
I think sort of two thoughts. I know when we were seeing the sort of results coming, or the outcomes from the COP in Madrid, the real first thought was there was so many opt-outs, there was so many half measures, people, there was just, opt-outs I think is the right word. I think we need proper leadership, proper commitments. The time is way past that we can, talk nicely, use pretty words about this, but actually, write, complete, uselessly undermine, what's trying to be achieved. The other one that comes to me, my background is not particularly in environmental issues. I'm sort of working with refugees is my background. And I know a few months ago, for the first time, a court recognised that fear of destruction of your environment, fear of the damage caused by the destruction of sort of ecological destruction was a legitimate reason to fear and to seek asylum. Essentially, it's on the level with threat and persecution of the Asylum Convention has. So again, if that started to be recognised, that level of danger is now here, that level of risk is here to people in the world, we really do need to have an approach as a country and at an international level that recognises just how integrated and how joined up all this kind of thing is. I think in the church, and certainly with Pope Francis, I think we're getting to be aware of this, but it needs to be properly recognised. I said in my previous answer, not being in silos, and this stuff, putting issues into silos, is not going to help us. So we really do need to recognise that this is a tipping point for the planet and for us as the people who are on it.
Thank you, Danny. Stephen, what would you like to see agreed at COP?
I think that there's an important aspect to this, that it's easy for us to say it's up to the governments, but it's not up to the governments. I think an important message is that we can all make a difference in this, particularly in our part of the world where we have got tremendous potential to reduce the damage we're causing in Scotland and in the UK, as the UK being the host of COP. So we really want to see us leading the way in the run-up to COP. So we need decisions that are taken by the government at a UK and a Scottish level to show that we're a world leader on this, and we're supporting people all around the world to make that difference themselves. But personally, individually, in our own families, in our own communities, we can all make changes to make that difference. And that's something that I think is an important message we would like to get out. One final point is, because it's coming here, we've got a great opportunity to be hosts, to have hospitality and a welcome to people who are either coming to Glasgow for the COP itself, or the fringe of people who are becoming in pilgrimage, campaigners, to get their point across and to make that really strong message. So parishes all over Scotland could be linking with other countries, either online or even people who are physically able to visit Scotland at that time, to make them welcome, but also to hear their story. And I think that's a great opportunity for us as well, to make that impact when the COP makes its decisions, that we're part of that as well.
Thank you, Stephen. I wonder, as I read the next question, perhaps our speakers could give me a wave if you have something particular planned. Tricia asks, I understand there's a climate strike day on the 25th of September. Can you tell us more about that, and particularly if your organisation is involved in planning anything for that day? I wonder if any of our speakers have got anything particularly planned for that day. Stephen, do you want to start us off? Yeah,
this can be quite a contentious thing, because school strikes can sometimes not be something that's seen as positive by some people when they think young people are coming out of school. But what we are saying is the young people have got a really strong voice just now, and we need to listen to young people when they say we have to do more. And that's really the important aspect, and it can be the Laudato Si schoolwork, which obviously Danny's explained is a fantastic new resource there. There could be eco-school programmes that are happening in the schools, but the climate strike's a very pointed way of young people saying we're unhappy with the situation that faces the world and we want to be heard on this. So we'll be encouraging our wider movement of churches to get involved if they want to, but to really listen to young people in their area. So we'll be promoting different activities as appropriate. And at this time, it's really difficult to encourage people to get involved in the traditional sort of rally type campaigning. So we'll be looking forward to supporting some of the youth climate strike on online activities and showing that the church is interested in hearing them and facilitating them in that and their access to a wider voice being heard across Scotland. Thank you, Stephen. I wonder if any of the others want to come in, any of our other speakers want to come in on that point on the climate strikes? In that case, I will move on to the next question. Rab asks, can you say something about the Climate Justice Fund? Jane, I wonder if you could perhaps talk to that for a moment.
The Climate Justice Fund, I actually can't speak to that, I'm afraid. Is anyone else? Yeah, Jonathan.
The Climate Justice Fund is a Scottish Government programme. It was set up in 2012, and basically it was born out of the kind of demand for climate justice. I was talking about recognising Scotland's role as one of the developed countries which have made the most contributions to emissions over the years. So it was recognising our historic role, and it was about kind of trying to give something back. So SCIAF is one of the partners. We deliver the Climate Challenge Programme Malawi, which has a kind of focus on water and energy projects for some of the most vulnerable communities in Malawi, which are affected by frequent floods or severe droughts linked to climate change. So the Climate Justice Fund is a Scottish Government project essentially, which sort of delivers on the idea of climate justice. Thank you, Jonathan. Jane, perhaps I could come to you for the next question. Kate says, COVID has illustrated in stark detail how the whole world has been affected by a virus, but how do we impress upon those who still deny climate change our deep interconnectedness in this issue when it comes to the challenge facing the world?
Yep, and there's the dog barking, that's okay. Yeah, absolutely. COVID has, I think, shown us just how interconnected we all are as a global community, and how what happens in one part of the world potentially can affect all of us. And I think, unfortunately, those who are climate deniers are possibly also COVID-19 deniers in the experience here that we're having in recent protests. It's extremely difficult to engage, I suppose, on many levels with people who have put their views in that camp. But what I would hope is that there will be people out there who will have seen how the science has shown us so much about COVID, how the global community has pulled together in a very positive way to fight this virus, and that we can apply those same principles to the climate crisis. You know, COVID is a symptom of climate. Sorry, this is Ozzy the dog barking, introducing himself, by the way. Putting in his twopence worth. So I think there's many positives that can come out of this pandemic, and one of them that I would hope is that we can show people how we can come together as a global community to fight the pandemic, but also the climate crisis. When you're dealing with climate deniers, it is an extremely difficult space to be in, and you can just present the science again and again, and there's still this denial is there, and that's my experience. But hopefully we can show people that as pulling together as global citizens, that we can overcome these obstacles as time goes on.
Thank you. Our next question asks, in trying to get things going in my parish, what do you think would be the best single kind of first step that they could take to make a practical response to these issues? I wonder, Stephen, if that's one to start off with you. Yeah, thank you very much, Callum. I mean, one thing that we do is, it's actually at the request of the Scottish Government, who want to hear what communities are saying about the changes we all need to make to reduce those harmful greenhouse gas emissions. It's hold what we call a climate conversation, and that's basically talking about the changes that could happen over the next 10 years with anybody. So it could be a parish setting, it could be, at the moment we'd always do these events online probably, and it would be the capacity to talk about
different things that could happen, how it affects people where they live. So it could be, if we want to encourage public transport, how accessible is it in your area? How easy is it to buy food that's locally grown and is sustainable? How easy is it to save energy in terms of the way that people maybe travel to work and heat their own home and so on? So that's a really good opener, to be open to anybody, and it can be a discussion that can take maybe half an hour to an hour tops, just talking about different scenarios that could happen, and people get to make it very real in their own setting. And from that you can then talk about, well, would we like to start a local group, which could be an eco group, justice and peace group could continue if there is one in the parish, to maybe take forward other ideas. But that climate conversation is a really good opener, and it's about people having their say without being judgmental, without telling them what has to be done. It's an opener to really say these are the ideas that could make a difference.
Thank you. If I could invite you to respond, folks, to a comment here that's been made rather than a question, but perhaps one that we could have a bit of a discussion around. Catherine says we need to listen to our young people, see, for example, what Greta Thunberg has achieved, and allow them agency. I wonder if you could talk to that, and Danny, if I could start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a comment I would completely agree with, endorse in every way. And I think I said, you know, part of certainly what I was seeing last year, I think certainly some here will know, some may not, Justice and Peace Scotland for the last few years have sort of had a couple of sort of big banner issues that we've highlighted sort of for the first half and second half of the year. In 2019, which was our 40th anniversary, we made Care for Creation the theme for the whole year. So we spent the whole year looking at different issues, different facets of that. The resources are all still on our website, which are well worth a look if you're after some of this stuff. And it was at the same time that we were seeing Greta Thunberg, the school strikes, all this stuff happening. And it was absolutely inspiring. To me, again, I've sort of got a background in youth work, in youth ministry. I think it's great. And I did end up asking a question which I ask on this and on too many other topics, you know, where is the Catholic Church? Where is the Catholic leadership? Where, you know, I did try and find out if any of the Catholic schools had taken a position on were they going to support students in a climate strike if they chose to walk out. And I never got an answer. I was never able to find out, and certainly no one came to us as a Bishops' Conference office to ask our thoughts on it. I think what we have seen with the climate strikes, and even I think more recently with things like the Black Lives Matter protests, the energy, the passion, the sort of desire to challenge and to change things for the better is not something that certainly hopefully my generation and certainly the generation that's coming up behind me lacks for in any way, shape or form. And it's really, really obvious. I don't think the church or any of us can be trying to put a halter on it, trying to control it and trying to make it a thing. You know, we can't tell these young people how to do this. We can't tell them this is the wrong way to be protesting. This is the wrong way to express it. When, you know, certainly with Black Lives Matter, you know, we've seen, you know, they tried peaceful protests. They tried taking a knee. It didn't work. So I think all we can do, those of us who are inspired by this, is follow that lead. You know, the idea of allyship in a lot of causes. You know, if you're not someone who is having lived experience or is directly impacted by an issue, you know, being an ally is not always the easiest thing because you don't know how to do it right. You know, there's not a lot of guides out there. But I'd say be prepared to follow that lead. Be prepared to offer support. You know, if we've got young people who are prepared to walk out of school and risk whatever sort of sanction there is, you know, where are the church, where are the members of the church or the parish of the wider community to say to the teachers, you know, please back them? Or if there's a protest happening somewhere in central Glasgow, in central Edinburgh, wherever, are we opening our buildings? Are we the ones who are there to stand with them, to offer them a place to retreat to if they need to from the weather or from you know, an operation by the police? So I don't know if it's about trying to provide leadership, because that leadership is there. I think, you know, we all need to accept that it's time to be following. It's time to not just be inspired, but to take the lead from the young people who are leading on this. which may not be comfortable. You know, it's not always easy to do. But I think that's what we need to be. We need to be prepared to do that. We need to be willing to learn from the people who have got the passion for this stuff.
Thank you, Danny. Jonathan, on the same point, on listening to young people, and perhaps as well the work that SCIAF's doing to engage with young people as well.
Well, definitely, yeah. So our, I mean, the global strike movement has been so powerful in making climate change what, when you think back just to even 2015, it was generally seen as a kind of fringe issue, but now it is a mainstream concern for everyone. And I think that the school strikes have been instrumental in that. And as others have said, you know, it is a difficult issue for the church and its agencies, because we do have you know, safeguarding responsibilities when it comes to schools. But SCIAF has supported last year in September the big strike day, which I think incidentally fell on an in-service day, so it didn't actually involve any truancy, which was great. And we were in George Square with young people marching, but we do also support schools to have these conversations as well, because I know that a lot of teachers want to engage with young people on the issues, and some schools are doing assemblies and so on. But I think also that now that the if you like, the kind of scientific debate has ended, there's a consensus now among the scientists, and the people who deny it will do so for political reasons rather than actual scientific reasons. But now that consensus has been reached, we're also, we can see what is happening with our own eyes when we see the storm, for example, hitting Louisiana at the moment, and fires in Australia, as someone mentioned in the chat. We know this is happening. We know also that the young people today will be the first generation to feel the really, you know, drastic effects of climate change in Scotland and Europe. So we do have a moral responsibility to listen to them, just as we have to listen to people in poorer countries elsewhere, which are more affected. So as a kind of, you know, with climate justice, we also need intergenerational justice, and that means listening and letting young people lead.
Thanks, Jonathan. Jane?
Yeah, I suppose I've been involved with the Fridays for Future movement for the past year in Dublin, and I mean, young people get lots of criticism around the school strikes, but all I can say, and I can't say it enough, is to please support them in whatever way you can, because they understand the science. They can see what's coming down the road. They can see how governments have failed them, and they are really afraid for their futures, and rightly so. And I'll just give one example, because I agree with everything that has been said already. In Dublin last September, when there was 20,000 people marching in the youth climate strike, a group of parishioners in a Dublin suburb parish who would have been of older generation, 300 of them gathered outside the parish church with their signs, and they lined the road in support of the strike that was happening in the city centre. They didn't feel comfortable going into a protest like that, but they did feel comfortable outside their parish church, advocating for young people and against this crisis as well. And other parishes I know organised a prayer service for the same time the strike was happening, put a word of good luck and well done in the parish newsletter. All these little things that people can do locally to say, we're behind you, we support you. So it's just that, you know, there's different levels of activism. You mightn't feel comfortable outside the Parliament every Friday with them, but you might feel comfortable doing something else. So we all find our spaces in this movement, but the leadership is absolutely there. And one Irish bishop came out in support of that September last year's strike. And we just hope that the next time more of them will. So also be lobbying at that side of things for our church leaders to make these statements, and our parish priests and so on, because they do need that support. And we're constantly saying, you know, where are young people? How can we interest them? This is the issue. And we have a spirituality in Ladad LC to back the activism and to support them spiritually in that way. So huge opportunity there in that whole area. So do support them and get involved.
Thank you, and it's great to see such great support in the chat and the comments as well. But if I can share Rab's comment there, as a grandparent, never felt prouder than to take my grandchildren to the climate strike, or sorry, to be taken by my grandchildren to the climate strike, I should say, and seeing our priest in his Franciscan gear there as well. And I think that lived faith and that lived witness is so strong. Stephen, if I could come to you with the next question that's been sent in by Anne, who says, how do we persuade the clergy that these matters are mainstream for authentic Christian witness and not just an optional extra which can be left to those who are interested in such things?
Yeah, I think an important part of that is, obviously my presentation I mentioned the spiritual, practical and global aspects that we think are important. It's like 3 sides of a triangle, you need to have them all there. I think that's the important aspect, that this is something which is timely, which comes from the traditions and the teaching of the church, and more recently in a very strong way through Pope Francis's Laudato Si encyclical. So what you're really saying is we're trying to make church as relevant as possible to the world we live in. And I think that's where there's an open conversation you can have to support parish priests and to support religious communities in terms of seeing this as something where the wider church, all of us, can be supporting each other in the activities we can do. The important part of that is making sure that it's something which is seen as being mainstream, it's seen as being central to our faith, the God of all creation. It's not about being an add-on. And I think that's the important aspect to this, that we can also see the discussion about young people is an important aspect to this. Young people will see the church as being more relevant because it's talking about the climate emergency and listening to their concerns. And this is a really obvious way for us to make the church more attractive to young people as something which is genuinely responding to the issues that they're raising as a significant degree of anxiety, and being there in a pastoral way to support people of all ages in their community. So I think that's where trying to say that we're there to help the parish priest in terms of some of the urgency that we all have to face in terms of facing up to this, but also making sure that it's there to support the spiritual aspects of life as a parish, which sometimes the priests can be left on their own to do an awful lot much of, and particularly in the Catholic parishes.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, if I could perhaps cross to you. You know, many of us from our experience in parishes will have come across the work that SCIAF do, particularly in putting pressure on government and organisations. Mike asks if we have any thoughts on the need to challenge companies, especially international companies.
Yeah, that's an interesting one actually, and one of the debates in recent years has been about at the last few COP summits, and the UN and the host countries have sought sponsorship from big polluting companies like BP and Shell and so on, to have a kind of big glossy exhibition stand as part of the actual summit. And there'd been a kind of growing campaign to stop that, because it was allowing these companies to sort of, you know, do a big PR exercise on how green they were, and they would have access to the negotiators and the high level government officials where they could lobby them. Really good news came out in the last week or so, where the UK government seemed to suggest that they were going to be banning them this year. We'll keep a close eye on that, and we'll hold them to account if there's any slippage on it, of course. But it does seem that we are there's at least one positive development in that front, that they won't be allowed to sponsor and get access to the kind of official fringe event this year.
Fantastic, thank you. Jane, if I can come across to you for a question from Marion, who says, those of us living in rural areas face the big challenge of a lack of public transport. That means overuse of cars, and no bikes are not an alternative for an ageing population, she says, in hilly areas. Is this a local issue? Is it a national issue? Who should we be lobbying? And you know, what would be the best course of action? She says, you know, is it even the case, should we be starting our own bus companies?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's a massive issue. I mean, my parents are in rural Ireland, and I totally appreciate the lack of public transport in this area as well. And it's the same issue. But I think it's, you know, you can lobby your local councils, you can lobby your parliamentary representatives, but also and this kind of links into the last question as well, just to remind people that there are 100 fossil fuel companies in the world causing 70% of the problem in terms of global emissions. And I would never put the weight of this crisis on any one person. Now, yes, we all have to do our part, and that is linked into our own personal relationships with the environment and how we choose to live our lifestyles as well. But it is also really important to remember that big picture. At COP24 in Poland, when we walked there with survivors of one of the most disastrous storms in human history, these people had lost their entire families in these storms. And when we got there, realizing that COP24 was being sponsored by 6 Polish coal companies, and the influence that they had within that conference was really astounding. So there also needs to be that awareness of the global as well as the local. So yes, start your local community bus route, absolutely fantastic. Lobby your local politicians and national, vitally important. But also remember the global scale of this crisis, and that we can't put it at the feet of one local community in a very rural area that has very poor services. So I think we need to be chipping away at this from both sides in terms of our campaigning. The other thing I learned on the pilgrimage was as we journeyed through communities, the real action was happening at the grassroots in local parishes, in local schools. So although, you know, the big talks and the big campaigning happen at the global scale, that very often it's the grassroots active groups that are making impacts. So we need both the top-down, bottom-up activism in this. So I don't know if that answers the question or helps in any way, but it's just to be aware of that scenario also, and yeah, keep pushing for the grassroots projects at the same time.
Thank you very much. Just take this opportunity to encourage people, please do continue to be sharing your questions in the chat. It's great to see so many questions, so many comments. I wonder, Danny, if I can cross to you for the next question and just ask, in your presentation, you referred to the document which gave rise to Laudato Si schools. The document from the Vatican Commission also referenced Laudato Si parishes, dioceses, etc. Are there plans for resources to be coming out to work alongside that?
That's a really great question, and I do not know what the answer is. We sort of got I've said this, we sort of got a jump start because we were looking at this for schools. But certainly the structure we've used is taking all of those goals and looking at what they can be, and inviting students to reflect on issues, to look at their own lives. I don't want to start listing all the examples, but some of it is, you know, use a carbon calculator, work out what your carbon footprint is, you know, look at the use of plastic in your schools, things like water bottles, all that kind of stuff. There's probably nothing that's going into this that does not apply in some way to a parish, to a larger institution, or to a diocese. I think the main thing from the document that the Vatican has, it's about this, you know, it's a 7-year journey that they've proposed, and I'm sure they've not picked that number at random. It's about starting the change, and I think it is about learning as you go. Certainly the materials that we have, you know, ourselves and SCIAF and SCARES, it's all going to be out there. If we're in a position to be doing a version branded and sort of targeted at parishes, I'm not in a position to say at the moment, but it's certainly an idea. I may have a chat with Stephen and see if it's something we can do with eco-congregations. Though I suspect eco-congregations, a lot of their stuff will probably already cover this. And if you are in a parish, I'm almost going to pass the buck and say, speak to Stephen, because they do great work, and that is who we would look to as the experts on that.
Absolutely. Just quickly before I cross to Stephen, Danny, we've had a follow-up question. Are the school resources going to be freely available?
Pretty much, yes. There is going to be some printed resources which is going to be going to schools. which SCES are going to be doing. The majority of it is going to be put online though, because we want to be able to update it and adapt it as we go along. So there may be a small cost to some schools for some of the printed materials specifically for teachers, but the bulk of it is going to be up on websites, available online. And again, even when I was pulling this stuff together in the last few days, we're referencing a lot of other people. We're referencing a lot of stuff that is open source, is already freely out there. So things like one of the school activities is look at making less plastic and less chemical alternatives for things like soap and washing up liquid and those kind of things. All that stuff is already on the internet. We're not reinventing the wheel for any of this. We're drawing on what's already out there. So I can't say there's zero cost. There may be a small bit for some of the printed resources aimed at the schools, but the bulk of this, it's online, which also means, of course, it's not printed, so you can look at it on a screen without printing off thousands and thousands of pages, which is always a plus. So sort of yes and no. I'm going to hedge on that one.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Danny. Stephen, is the Laudato Si parishes something that you see as complementary to your work in Eco Congregation Scotland?
Yeah, it's a fantastic development for us, because I think, to be honest with you, Laudato Si is very popular in other denominations, and it's sometimes possibly even better read in other parts of the wider church than it is within Catholic parishes that we're all part of. So I think there's a fantastic opportunity there for us to say to people, now is the time to really commit to this, to listen to that strong message that Pope Francis has. But the other aspect of that is being able to work, to borrow a phrase from the encyclical, so people of goodwill, because you can work with people in your own community, organisations that are already working there. It could be, we do a lot of work, for example, with Zero Waste Scotland and Keep Scotland Beautiful, who are big national organisations, but they're trying to encourage people to make those changes in their community. But also tackling those bigger issues, those global issues, the support we get from the likes of SCIAF is fantastic as well. So I think having a new resource is really exciting, and being able to work with young people in a particular way is another exciting opportunity to really open up that conversation that people have, to see how it can make a difference where they live, as well as affecting people who are far more disadvantaged in other parts of the world from a climate justice angle.
Sandon, thank you very much, Stephen. Jane, if I can cross back to you for a question from Rab. Rab points out that many advertisers will tell us this is a quote-unquote green product, and politicians tell us this is a green policy. Who can help us to discern the authenticity of such claims?
Yeah, excellent question. You know, I suppose there's a lot of what's called greenwashing out there. So companies, you know, will slap the word eco on any product because it's one of the buzzwords at the moment. So absolutely right to be vigilant. Yeah, in Scotland, I'm not sure. I know if in Ireland there are various NGOs that you can go to check the validity of some certain products. So I know Friends of the Earth, the Stop Climate Chaos movement, they would all have links to various certified companies that they would support. So that could be one way. Just doing a little bit of research, I think, is another way. And when it comes to policies, going to the activism groups. So in Ireland, it would be Stop Climate Chaos, which is a coalition of many different organisations that come together to work on policy issues, and to finding out from groups like that. I'm sure SCIAF are the same with campaigns and policy. That the experts are there that can really discern what different political parties and governments are doing to keep on target and in line with their climate ambitious targets as well. So just a little bit of research, and I think questioning is always excellent. If you're aware and you're watching out for stuff like this, that's half the battle. But you soon, I think, come to know which products are recommended and that can be trusted. It takes practice as well, and your local community groups, co-ops, green groups that might be able to help you. So a little bit of research and a little bit of support from your NGOs, I think, is always a good option.
Thank you. We do have time for a couple more questions, so please do continue to add them into the chat. Jonathan, perhaps I could cross to you and put a point. We have got a suggestion here. Perhaps we should be campaigning for free public transport to support some of the issues that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, definitely. That's an interesting one, actually, because in Scotland we have this this organisation set up called a commission set up called the Just Transition Commission, about how and it's all about sort of making sure that our steps towards a net zero future are not basically we're not disadvantaging the poor in Scotland as we move to net zero. So that means finding new jobs for workers in areas like oil and gas that are going to be affected by that. But it also means public transport. And one of the Just Transition Commission's recommendations, which I think came out in a report published in the last week or so, were for sustainable community-owned public transport across Scotland. And it's actually really worrying, because also just in recent days there was an announcement from Alexander Dennis, which is a bus making firm based in Falkirk, and they're laying off 650 staff as a result of the recession. So what we need to achieve that net zero future in a fair way that benefits everyone is also at the same time being put at risk by the pandemic. So that is something that we really need to work on.
Fantastic. I'm just reading as well in the comments in response to the last question as well. There's a couple of suggestions about a couple of websites for fact checking as well. Ethical Consumer being one of them, and someone suggesting Which as well might be a good option. So thank you very much. I think we've taken the questions that have been posed. Rab has added in another though to ask, how do the Laudato Si animators network in Ireland? I think that would be one for yourself, Jane.
Yeah, that's a good question, because we are a very new group, and I suppose I'm based in Trócaire as the Laudato Si officer, and part of my role is to support that network. So we have almost 300 people. Now, not all would have completed the animators course, but they are Laudato Si animators around the country, and I suppose we're trying to build that network, communicate with them and support them in their initiatives. So at the moment that is all online. It's literally only in the past 12 months that a group like this has emerged. So as we're in COVID times, we haven't been able to gather as of yet, but certainly we are beginning to support more and more that network and grow that network. And it's at the moment sharing a lot of online events for the season of creation, online workshops, and helping individuals in parishes to lead local events where possible at the moment. So it's early days for the animators in Ireland, but it's exciting because even in that small period of time, we are up to almost 300 people, and they're people who are very passionate and care and want to do something and take action. So that's where we are at the moment.
Fantastic, thank you. Danny, another question for yourself. Do you think the bishops of Scotland could be persuaded, this question asks, to call for a 3-line whip for parishes to engage in the Laudato Si parish initiative?
This may be where I get fired, because the bishops are my employer and this is being recorded. I think certainly the meetings I've had and when we do speak to the bishops, they are aware of this. You know, they're not disinterested, they're not dismissive of this. When we meet, we have, again, it started looking ahead to COP with sort of a bishops' conference. We were a sort of COP sort of a steering committee. We're now slightly shifting that to become a sort of group looking at integral ecology and all these kind of issues in a slightly wider way, which has ourselves, SCIAF, other groups. It's chaired by Bishop Nolan of Galloway, who's president of JMP Scotland and one of the bishops on the SCIAF board. You know, they are aware of this. I think they would like to. I don't know. I don't know if sort of three-line whipping their priests is quite how things work in the diocese, either in theory or in practice. But I think we certainly will. We always welcome support from them. I know from Rab ahead of this evening, a couple of bishops did share this. There was a message put in the ad clerem, the email that goes round the diocese to all the clergy in St Andrews and Edinburgh, mentioning this event and season of creation and everything that's coming up. So, I mean, I suppose it would be wonderful if all we had to do was convince the eight bishops to do this, and they could then immediately get every single parish pulling on board. That's not the reality of our church, I suppose. I think what we can do is hit it from all angles. Be speaking in the parish, be speaking to our priests, be speaking to the bishops. I think the more we have the conversation, and I think the more we normalise having this conversation in churches, in parishes, in our communities, it can only be a good thing. The greater awareness there is of this stuff in the church. And I think we keep coming back to it. I think Laudato Si 5 years ago probably was absolutely game changing in this. Even if you could pretend that caring for creation was a fringe issue before, you certainly can't now. I suppose the last thing I'd say is, when I've had sort of some people who perhaps do react negatively to this stuff, and some of it is online on social media, sort of saying, the church's job is to preach the gospel. I suppose all you can say is, if you're such a talented preacher that you can preach to dead people on a dead planet, you've really missed your vocation. Go and preach more. But the seriousness of that is, ultimately this is make or break. We can't, you can't preach the gospel on a dead planet to dead people. So I don't think the bishops can start whipping, but the more we do to really just raise this conversation in our parishes, it can only be a good thing.
Thanks, Danny. I wondered if I can come to Jonathan and then to Jane on the next question about ethical church investment, a view from Scotland and Ireland, also referred to as morally responsible investment. Jonathan, do you know what the current state of play might be in the Scottish Church around ethical investment?
Is this in terms of investment in fossil fuels?
Yes.
Yeah, I think as far as I'm aware, there haven't been any public declarations of divestment from Scottish dioceses, and very few from England and Wales as well. I know that the Global Catholic Climate Movement does publish a kind of rolling list every year or so of all the Catholic institutions which have divested. SCIAF is on it, but as far as I'm aware, there haven't been any dioceses yet.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jonathan. And a view from Ireland, please, Jane.
Yeah, I just posted a link there in the chat, which will take you to the GCCM's divestment toolkit. So just briefly, in 2018, on the eve of the visit of Pope Francis to Ireland, the Irish bishops as a conference announced their divestment from fossil fuels, which was, and it was just a great moment. And since then, individual dioceses of 26, I think 18 have divested from the fossil fuel industry. So the conference as a whole has divested. I understand that's their shared assets. And then the work now is on individual dioceses. So that's very much work that Lorna Gold was doing in conjunction with Trócaire and GCCM. If you go onto that webpage, you can see the list of Catholic institutions globally that have divested. It's a fantastic piece of good news for the church globally, because Catholic church institutions, I understand, make up the largest grouping within the global divestment movement, which is now into something like $14 trillion, and it really is pulling the finance and the power away from the fossil fuel industry. So I suppose just to say, read up on that and maybe get in touch with your bishop locally and say, why is our diocese still have its assets invested in an industry that is destroying our planet? Pope Francis says you must divest. So that might be a little project for some of you to get involved in.
Thank you very much, Jane, and thank you to everyone for the questions this evening, and to all of our speakers for your contributions. Back over to Rosa.
Thank you. Thanks, Callum. Can I just now thank Stephen, Jane, Danny and Jonathan. I mean, I think it's perfectly clear from the discussion that your talks generated just how inspired people were by them, and also how helpful they were to generate that kind of conversation and thought provocation was amazing. Just a couple of things that really struck me that came through was the constant theme of interdependence, interconnectedness, which is also what Pope Francis is talking about in Laudate Si, that we need each other and we need the planet to survive, to live. Like Danny, you put it quite well, we can't preach to a dead planet. And the other one that came through to me strongly was the think global and act locally, and let's see what we can do together. Because I don't think there has been a time like this or a momentum like this of interest, passion and commitment to the creation, to the environment, to the planet, to one another. So thank you again, everybody. Thanks to everybody who contributed and to all who were here tonight. And as usual, what we do is we finish with a closing prayer. Loving God, we thank you for the gift and ministry of Stephen, Jane, Danny and Jonathan. We thank you for what they've shared with us tonight. We ask that you anoint them anew with your Spirit, such that your life may be deepened within them. We pray for the organisations they represent. May they be affirmed in their mission of responding to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. We pray for us all gathered here tonight. We may have the wisdom to see the face of Jesus in the face of all those we meet, the courage to do what is right, and the discernment to know what you call us to do. Bless us with the grace to thirst, to hunger for justice, and grant us the gifts of patience, wisdom, and perseverance. We ask this in the name of Jesus, our Saviour and companion on our journey. Amen.
Thanks, Rosa, and thanks again to the panel. Just like to highlight a couple of events that are coming up. The Season of Creation Retreat, Christian Discipleship and Ecological Sustainability on Saturday the 12th of September with Diamante Murku. And then we have, following on from our assembly, this evening was a following on from an assembly event, looking at the environment and how we respond to the climate change. One of the things that came up at the assembly very strongly, and there was a sense that the majority of our speakers kind of stuttered over a response to it about being a woman in the church, obviously with the exception of Mary McAleese. So we're going to have a conversation on the 8th of October with Tina Beattie. And the final one will be, again, the LGBTI in the church was raised during the assembly and discussion, and very much so when Mary McAleese did her presentation. So we're going to have an evening conversation with Father James Allison on Thursday the 5th of November. And we'll be sending out further information on the two conversations. For those interested in the retreat, we can send out the flyer. In fact, we'll send it out to everyone again that's here this evening, and you can just book up for that with the details. So thanks very, very much again, everyone, and thanks to our speakers, and thanks to Rosa for chairing.
Thank you.
And take care, and God bless. And I don't know what's happening to my background.